Georgia's civil society organizations and human rights defenders have raised the alarm over a new legislative proposal that could dramatically reshape the country's political landscape. The draft law, introduced by the ruling Georgian Dream Party, seeks to impose harsh penalties on protesters and limit the activities of opposition parties, a move critics describe as an open assault on democratic freedoms. The proposed amendments include a series of measures that, if passed, would significantly tighten state control over political activity. One of the most controversial provisions would allow the government to strip individuals connected to political parties accused of violating constitutional principles of their right to participate in elections or hold public office. This clause, opponents argue, could easily be used to disqualify opposition leaders ahead of upcoming national polls. Another section of the bill increases penalties for public demonstrations. Peaceful acts such as blocking roads or setting up barricades, common tactics during political protests, could result in up to 15 days of detention for a first offense and as much as 1 year in prison for repeat violations. Critics say this effectively criminalizes legitimate public assembly. Additionally, the government has announced plans to seek constitutional action to restrict or even ban certain opposition parties, citing alleged threats to the stability of the state. These initiatives come amid an ongoing crackdown on opposition figures who participated in recent demonstrations, some of whom now face charges of attempting to usurp power. Civil society reaction. The reaction from Georgia's rights groups has been swift and fierce. A coalition of NGOs issued a joint statement condemning the proposal as alien to the democratic world, and warning that its passage would transform Georgia into an authoritarian state. They emphasized that the measures send a dangerous message, that citizens who challenge the government risk losing their freedom and political rights. Activists argue that the bill is designed not to protect democracy but to eliminate dissent. They note that Georgia's authorities have already been using administrative detention, heavy fines, and intimidation to suppress protests. The new proposal, they say, formalizes those practices into law. Political and social context. The proposed law follows months of unrest after the October municipal elections, which the opposition claims were marred by irregularities. Thousands of Georgians took to the streets demanding transparency and accountability. Instead of dialogue, the government responded with arrests and criminal charges against protest leaders. This is not the first time the Georgian Dream government has faced accusations of democratic backsliding. In recent years, it has pushed through a controversial, foreign influence law targeting NGOs and independent media, prompting mass protests and international criticism. The new proposal is widely seen as a continuation of that pattern, deepening concerns about the erosion of political freedoms. Implications for democracy. Analysts warn that the passage of these laws would have severe consequences for Georgia's democratic institutions. First, it would erode political pluralism by allowing the ruling party to disqualify rivals through vague legal definitions. Second, it would deter citizens from exercising their right to protest, as even minor acts of civil disobedience could lead to imprisonment. Furthermore, such measures could compromise Georgia's long-term aspiration to join the European Union. Brussels has repeatedly emphasized that adherence to democratic norms, freedom of assembly, and political competition are essential conditions for integration. By moving in the opposite direction, Georgia risks isolating itself from its Western partners and jeopardizing its international standing. Government's position. The Georgian Dream Party insists that the proposed legislation is intended to safeguard constitutional order and prevent destabilization. Officials argue that some protesters and opposition leaders have acted outside the law and that tougher measures are necessary to maintain peace and public safety. However, critics counter that these justifications are thinly veiled attempts to silence dissent and consolidate power ahead of future elections. Growing concerns. Observers fear that the line between legal governance and political repression is quickly disappearing. The vague language of constitutional violations could be used to target anyone who criticizes the government or participates in peaceful protest. Human rights advocates warn that such a precedent could lead to the systematic dismantling of Georgia's democratic institutions. Conclusion. The controversy over the new proposal reflects a deeper struggle for the soul of Georgian democracy. Rights groups, opposition parties, and civil society leaders argue that the government's path threatens to undo decades of progress made since the country's independence. As tensions rise, Georgia stands at a crossroads. it can choose dialogue, reform, and a recommitment to democratic principles, or continue down a path of repression that risks isolating it from the democratic world.